Good morning, everybody. We are live here today for our 7th Google Hangout with Rebecca Henry and Phyllis Freeman, and we're happy to have them here with us, and of course our team. Just a little bit about them. Phyllis Freeman is the director of the Maryland Talent Education Center. She creates websites and runs social media for musicians and music companies like the Potter Violin Company, and she also has her classicalmusiccity.com website, which you should check out. She also, you know what? Hold on a second. Excuse me. I just realized I need to look at something that Rebecca sent me so I can tell you all about her. And I'm going to find that, so I apologize for. All right. And along with Rebecca Henry, Phyllis and Rebecca started violinpractice.com, which we're going to talk about today. Rebecca has, over the last 25 years at the Peabody Institute in Baltimore, Rebecca has developed one of the premier pre-college string programs in the country. She also teaches pedagogy in the conservatory and mentors students in the Masters of Violin and Viola degree in performance and pedagogy. She is an assistant professor of viola at the Gettysburg College Sunderman Conservatory of Music and also teaches string pedagogy at the University of Maryland School of Music. In the summer, she teaches at the Indiana University String Academy and Retreat for professional violinists and violists. But both Rebecca and Phyllis have been teaching for over 25 years and have a lot of experience to bring and share with us today. So we're going to talk about the social media and their violinpractice.com as well as practicing. So welcome, Rebecca and Phyllis.
Hey.
Hi, nice to be here. Okay, so we're going to get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this project that you are still working on and getting ready to, I think you've already launched it, but are still expanding, Violin Practice.
Yeah, well, it's up and ready to go, but go ahead, I'll let you start.
Well, I guess I would start by saying that Phyllis and I have worked together on and off over the last many years, both at Peabody and the area, and we're always brainstorming about our teaching and trying to come up with more effective ways for our students to practice. And years ago, we got together and talked about making videos to help students practice, and Phyllis did some of that with the school she was teaching at that time. And then I think technology wasn't up with what we were wanting to do. So finally, now with streaming and the ease of putting videos up, we have something that we're trying to support students and parents and teachers through the practice process. So that's the big picture, and you might want to say something more specific.
Well, when we had conversations about pedagogy and about teaching in general, we always came back to the same fundamental issue: was students don't know how to practice. And if you talk to a lot of people, they say they didn't figure out how to practice until they were in their 20s. So one of the things we were hoping to do was to help students, guide them through that act of practicing, help them understand about repetitions, because it seems to be the fundamental issue with a lot of students is just knowing what to do when they get into the practice room.
That's right. So what have you, okay, so let's start, since this is set up for beginners and younger students. So what would you say to actually probably their parents as well as their teachers about how to begin to train them to understand how to practice?
Right.
Well, I think that what we've done on the site is we've tried to take them through a lot of aspects of what has to go on at the early levels. So there are physical warm-ups that don't have the instrument at all to work on balance and posture. There are skills and drills, just plucking the string many times to develop the actual physical skills. There's singing and musicianship and working on repertoire. So I think the beginning level is to understand that there can be value in practicing discrete aspects of learning the instrument and becoming a musician in a holistic fashion. Eventually, of course, we want to practice in a holistic fashion. It takes a long time to get there. And we have things also for advanced students and teachers, but as a start,
Yeah, I think when I talk to beginning parents too, now that I've been a parent, I have 3 kids that are 2 of them are in college and one's on her way. I have a different perspective on teaching than I did before I took my own children through the process. So I've really been working in the last few years about being much more specific on their practice sheets that I'm writing out for them, about making sure parents are seeing exactly what it is that I would like for them to work on at home, and different aspects for the child that are unique to each child. And so I try to work a lot more with parents and be much more clear and precise and make sure the parents understand what's going on with the young children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is key. Parents need to be in the studio with the notebook in hand, and you always have to be addressing them. Do this, do that. I think also having charts for them, and actually visual charts for the kids to see. They really like that, and they like being able to put stars or stickers when they've done something, and a certain amount of times.
What we did in violin practice is there are documents you can download at each level, and one of the pieces of paper that the students, it's called a student practice guide. So each level has like a theory component that they write things out, and it has the exact steps that they're going to go through at this particular level. But the other thing is it has a chart just designed exactly for that, because young students love checking things off and putting the stars in. So they have a whole chart that they download every single time they do one of the lessons, that they can check off all that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So that visual representation seems to be really important for young children.
And I think one of the really interesting things that we've done is that we've created videos that students can actually practice along with the video. Now, that's not, of course, going to take the place of the teacher or everything you're doing. But I hear a lot from parents, and also from parenting my own children, about the dissonance that can go on in the household over practicing and doing repetitions and doing what the teacher said. So we have like the warm-ups and things that they can actually practice with the screen and with us, reminding them to relax their shoulders or move their head. And the feedback I've gotten from parents of my students doing it is that it has de-stressed the practicing a little bit, a lot actually, for them at home, to be able to do play along or practice along with videos for parts of what they do. Of course, not everything that they do, but I think it's helping them with repetition.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Do we have questions? Jessica?
Okay. What do you think has been the most beneficial thing from your practicing website for your own particular students?
Well, I'll go back to this. For instance, I have a 5-year-old male student. He's a young boy who's very fidgety, and I observed him actually put up the screen where I did the feet and the plucking, and he would just stand there and calm down and observe as if he was in a group class. So he would watch and breathe, and I would say, wiggle your shoulders, and he would do it. And then the minute that little 1 or 2 minute video was over, he's bouncing around the room again. So the mom felt that it was fantastic that he could, during the time he watched that little one video and practiced with it, he was very, very, very focused. And he could wiggle out, and they could come back to another one when it was their time. So that's been very helpful for my parents.
I mean, I also think that it helps. They do more repetitions. So even though you might write it in the notebook that they're supposed to do 10 martellet bows on the A string, again, it avoids parental debate over that discussion, over that topic. So they just do it with the video. And then the other thing is we have a section called performance practice where they can play along with the pianist, and we got some older college students who we thought would be really fun for the kids to watch, to play along with. So we control the tempo, because I think especially with beginners, they really can't use a metronome. They just don't have that. A 5- and 6-year-old doesn't have that ability to listen to a metronome and play at the same time. And their version of slow and their parents' version of slow is often very different. So that performance practice where we control the tempo and have them play along slowly with pieces before they actually get to the performance level has been really helpful.
Good. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. More questions. Caroline?
I found, especially this year, that one of the challenges has been students that are totally overscheduled with a different activity every single day, where even if they're interested in the violin, they just can't give the time that I'm asking for. So it's always kind of a difficult balancing act to talk to the parents without getting involved in any family drama, insisting how much I would like for them to do, whether or not the goal is for them to become professional violinists, which it probably isn't. But so what advice do you have for speaking to parents about how to manage the time at home and whether the kid actually might have too much going on?
Well, one thing I always start with is to remind them that studying an instrument is not just about coming to the lesson the hour of the week or a lesson in orchestra or a lesson in group. The commitment to the instrument is an everyday commitment. And the minimum that I generally recommend asking for in terms of practice is practicing the length of your lesson. If you have a 30-minute lesson, practice 30 minutes. If you have an hour lesson, practice an hour. Of course, we'd all love it to be more, and sometimes it is more. But I feel that it's fair to say that if you're not investing that much time, it's not fair to the process. You won't be able to bring to the process.
Excuse me, that much time every day.
Every day, right. Every day. And then you, as a parent who also had children going through this and who also were swimmers, I can say you have a wink in the eye and you know that you know your family. There's going to be a day when the kids are all melting down and it's not going to be productive to practice. That's okay. Or, you're going away for a swim meet for the weekend or whatever it is, that's not going to happen. But I think you're asking for a reasonable investment and a balance, and that the child is bringing something to the lesson.
Yeah, I think that's the important part, is to have the conversation up front before the student starts. The parent's very clear about what the expectations and the commitment are going to be. And I have to say, one of the things I've always had is actually sports envy. Because, I thought a couple of weeks ago, we're the only activity that a kid has that requires such a fine level of skill. It requires so much repetition and so much training, and we see them for a half hour a week. And then additionally for a group, but that's not individualized. Whereas these kids participate in sports, and those coaches expect to see them every day for 2 to 2.5 hours as they get older, especially. So, I think that's an analogy you can use with parents, because they get that we're a much more sports-oriented culture sometimes than we are music-oriented, and that this is developing a skill set. And just as if you put your child into a sport, they need to do that every day, because there's so much physical skills that have to be developed. You need to practice every day the same way. And unfortunately, I can't be there every day for you, so the parent has to be doing that at home.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot too. That just how much do you swim, and how much do you run track, and how much do you play soccer? You're practicing and all of that. So I always compare it to that as well. I've gotten to the point where I won't take swimmers. I just like, you swim? Oh, okay, sorry. I can't do it. Well, because they have practice in the morning before school and after, and they're exhausted, and they don't practice. They don't practice their instrument, so it's.
Well, I will just say that one of my swimmer daughters is, she's played in her orchestra all through high school and all through college, and maybe not to the level she could have if she didn't swim. But one day she said to me, "Mom, I like music, but I love swimming. And what are you going to do as a parent? You want them to follow their dreams, but I'm comfortable with students, of course, for whom the music is not their first love, especially as they get into the early teen years and they're starting to figure out where their passion is. It may not be music, and I think they still can play and practice. So that's where you just have to find the balance with the family.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I think most of our students are not going to be musicians. And, thank God for that, because there's no jobs out there. But, we need our audiences, and they'll enjoy music for the rest of their life and play in their community orchestras or in their local fiddle bands or whatever. And I understand that, some of these kids, I have a lot of students who do other things, and that, the violin is not the very top of their list, but we do expect them to practice. And I think by having clear-cut expectations and a practice book, I have these really great, the musician's practice planner, love those books. and they can write in everything. And I think that when they're doing it and they're taking ownership of it, it's a really, they practice more, and it's a really good thing. So.
Well, I think we also have a problem in this culture with the mythology of talent, because parents think that, oh, my kid's either going to be good at this or they're not.
Right.
And it's not a question of talent. It's a question of just do it every day, and you'll be amazed at how, good you can end up being at it. And I don't want a kid to start and take lessons for a couple of years and then drop out because they didn't practice, and then walk away feeling like they weren't good at it. Mm-hmm. So I mean, music is a really important part of our world. And what a tragedy to have a kid take lessons for 2 years, and because they don't schedule the time in, walk away and have a negative feeling about making music.
Right. Yes, I agree. Okay, Brittany, question.
I have a question that kind of goes along with what you were talking about with preparing the parents to be involved with lessons and everything. But with parents who are not musicians and feel they are ill-equipped to help their students practice, is there some way that you prepare them, talk them through how to take notes? What would you say to a parent who is complaining about not knowing enough about music?
Go to violinpractice.com.
Yeah, go to our website. But honestly, definitely that will be a huge help for non-musician parents, because they'll get walked through it, the kids can play with the piano on there, and so on. But the first thing I usually tell parents who express reservations about not being a musician is I say, that is totally fine. It's totally fine that you're not a musician. As a matter of fact, it may be better for your child. Musician parents, and I was one, so I can say this, it's challenging, it's ambivalent. They almost know too much. They can be stressful on their students because they know it's out of tune, and they know the rhythm isn't right, and it can be harder for them to set back. Whereas sometimes the non-musician parents are the most joyful and the most happy at every little progress that the child makes. So the first thing is please encourage your non-musician parents to jump right in, and then help them take notes, try to figure out how you're going to help them tune, walk them through everything, and our site will be a big help to those parents.
Well, I have a lot of parents who now bring iPads and tablets into lessons. When I get to something that's really unique and very specific, they'll get up even with their phone and just record it. So I think bringing technology into our studios is going to be a big help with that. We don't need to record the whole lesson because I don't think most people have time to watch it again, but definitely when there's an item coming up that's very specific, or with a bow hold or something they're doing with their left hand or a shift, the parent, and you cue the parent to take a video of this, get your phone and just film this, you have it at home, is a great help.
I'm going to mention one other thing, because one of my the parents of one of my students, parents are not musicians, and the daughter really loves music and is practicing and doing lots. So this parent has tried to go online and find information to fill in information for herself. And I've discovered actually the amount that these parents are going on YouTube and everywhere else to try to find things. They're trying to find recordings of the pieces and this and that, and so much is out there. It's just not very good, of course. And so one of the things that we're doing on our site to support that is we're going to have performances of nice quality common teaching pieces, so that we can at least say, if you go to this site, and it'll be a free resource, and listen to the repertoire here, there'll at least be nice recordings. It's amazing what some of the parents are out there looking for. So
yeah, I've had that happen. They have me look at them.
Quality pedagogy things in there too. So there'll be all kinds of vibrato training, shifting training, everything that for my older students. A lot of them do bring video into the lesson and then take notes in their music. That's what I have them do, because they write afterwards. It's like we live in the lesson. It's really helpful. But I just want to be able to say, go watch the site, go watch the tape of this exercise we did, and it's like these flipped classrooms. They can go home and look at it and process it, come back into the lesson, and then we can really work on it. So I think it's speeding up that process.
Good. That sounds great. Okay, next question. Does anybody have a question for us?
I have a question. Just regarding nowadays, a lot of kids are starting learning instrument because their parent kind of make them do it, and to be honest, not all the students are very into playing an instrument. And I was wondering, is there any suggestion that you can suggest that can help to motivate them to be more involved or be more helping to like the instrument more? Because that's one of the, I think, common things that happen these parents.
Well, actually, I did a presentation at the last ASTA conference on the power of community and positive peer pressure. So one of the things that I find keeps these kids playing for the rest of their life are the friends they make within the studio, within the programs. So I run a school. There's probably about 60 to 80 string players, both violin, viola, and cello. And so I work a lot on having cross-generational interaction. So I want the older students interacting with the young students, and then it's good for the parents because the parents can sit back and those of the young students can see where they're headed. So I think it's making sure that these young students, when they start, have another reason besides my parents want me to do it, and that other reason can be I want to play that piece, or I think those kids that are teenagers that I see in the group concerts or at the recitals are really cool, and so they start to buy into the culture a little bit more, independently of their parents' wishes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I've started to include. We have our Northwestern Strings group, the advanced group, but the next group, which I think, Rebecca, what do you all call yours? The violin choir. We have the.
We have a violin choir, intermediate, and a pre-conservatory group also.
Yeah. So, and I've started including them in more, like we get together and practice pieces together, and that they'll perform on the concerts. And we're getting ready to do, every year we go down and do the part of the Welcome Mule pre-concert at Orchestra Hall or Symphony Center, downtown Chicago. And I bring those kids in, so it gets them excited. I'll go out to dinner afterwards, and they become friends. I think that's so important that they create these really great friendships, and it's and by doing these things together, going out and playing concerts, taking the kids on tour. When we went to Italy and to France, those kids many of them are still really good friends even after they've gone on and graduated. So I think it's important to create this community. I think that's
those kinds of activities like playing in the community. So the town my school is in is Frederick, Maryland, and it's a small, a really beautiful downtown. So over the next couple of weeks, the kids will go out in groups and perform holiday music in stores and at retirement communities and at the historical society and all these places. And the younger kids who are just starting know that they do that and they see it, and I try to bring them in to just read a couple little holiday tunes. And so they get very excited. In fact, they initiate it every year. The teenagers are, well, when are we going to play the holiday stuff? And you just have to create these activities that are so much fun for them to do if they want to stay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You can also get the younger kids to do play the sleigh bells when they do Jingle Bells or.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see. More questions. Next person.
I have a question about tween girls and when they're at that stage where they get conscious and they won't play out, but when I yell and get them to move, they'll do it. But do you have any other suggestions?
Oh, I have a great comment for you. Okay. As I said, my daughters were swimmers, and I had a conversation with their coach, and he had a really interesting observation, probably not scientific, but over his many years of experience, and which was girls at this age and boys are different in terms of performance. In other words, with boys, and this is generalization obviously, you can almost say anything to them to try to get them to play well. You can be difficult with them, you can expect more, you can razz them, and they go out there and play well, they feel good about themselves. With girls, they have to feel good about themselves first before they go play well. It's a little bit the other way. So I think in those tween years when they're growing and they're feeling awkward, they need a lot of care to be sure that they're really prepared before they go out and perform. You need to be sure they've played in class, they've played in the lesson, that they can physically play. Don't give them music that's too hard for them, that's really debilitating for them. work on the aspects of themselves that they do feel that are positive, whether they're expressive or their fingers are fast or whatever it is that they do well. Find repertoire that helps them shine in the ways that they feel well. And again, play duets with them, do things that help connect them to the love of music. And they will grow through this. They will be more confident when they pop out at 16.
Right. I think it's strategically picking repertoire for that age.
Huge.
It has to be something they emotionally connect to, and again, that they feel so confident about playing. And it's almost universal. I mean, it's all these 11, 12, 13-year-old girls go through some period where their moms or their parents are calling going, oh my gosh, she's losing it. I don't know what to do, how to help her. And they just, yeah, that's the best you can do to help guide them through it. I don't think there's a way to avoid it. It's just the way they are, but you just have to pick pieces that really speak to them and allow them to show their skill set off in a great way.
Yeah, I think playing duets, like ending a lesson with a duet, I do that with a few of my students, and I remember in my lessons how much fun it was. That's like the best thing, and so you just kind of can let go of all the technical things that you've been working on and all that, and just play. And I think that's a great way to end a lesson on a really positive note by sight reading or even playing duets that they already know really well. So, good. Next question.
I have a question with transitioning students to independent practicing. If you have any signs you look for to know that they're ready for that, how you prepare them for their at-home practice, anything you have on that?
I think this is a really important topic. So if you have parents that are in the lesson in the early years, and some obvious signs you will see is when the child looks at the parent and tells them to shut up when they're like intervening in the lesson. So you can pick up right away on whether the parent's presence is supportive or anxiety producing for the child. I think that's a sign. A lot of times what I'll do is transition it slowly. Have the parent bring the child to the lesson, then step out for 15 or 20 minutes and come back at the end, and we'll talk about what we did. I think that staying connected with the parent is very, very important during that process. But I think they also have to realize that this is a transition and it takes time. When the parent finally is asked to leave the room, I always tell them that practicing at home is probably going to get worse before it gets better, because the kids often think that they're more independent than they really are. And it takes a while for that balance to work out. So it's a long process, and it's not a simple one. The other thing that often happens in that transition to me is that when the children are younger, if the parents are kind of telling them to practice at home, and they're monitoring that practice. As they get into the early teen lessons, I feel like it's more now they have to be accountable to me instead of to the parent. So the parent has enough battles to fight in the early teen years and the teen years. They're fussing over what they're doing at night and what they're wearing and all of that stuff. So you have to be more of the heavy with the expectation and accountability to what they walk into the lesson, and the parent becomes more of the support system. So I do think there's a very slow and long emotional and relationship changes in the triangle.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of students who I needed to get the parents out of the lesson, not because there was any negative interaction, but just because I felt like the child was too dependent on the parent, and it was time for them to start to take responsibility for some of their own thinking and their own development. So I kind of see that coming. Like I had a student last week, and I said, oh, how old are you? Well, I'll be 11, in a couple of weeks. I said, I'm going to have mom not in the lesson soon, so you're going to have to start thinking and remembering what we're talking about. So I start to encourage them to pick up the pencil and you write it in the part instead of me writing it in the part, or make sure they repeat back to you at the end of the lesson the points that have been covered, because it amazes me how many times I'll spend a half hour working on a bow hold and I'll ask the student at the end, well, what do we work on? And they're like, oh, my vibrato. I know. I don't know where they were in that lesson, but it's just starting. So I try to start prompting them to take the responsibility for their own learning before I get the parent out, because I think it's important for their development as human beings to be able to work on their own and take that responsibility. And like I said, sometimes it's not a negative thing. They're not resisting the parent. It's too much. They're actually doing the opposite, and they're just relying on the parent too much.
Another thing that I often say with the parents, every once in a while you'll have a parent who doesn't want to leave the lesson just because they enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, not in a bad way. It's nothing. They're not trying to be over-controlling or anything. I mean, obviously, I'm sure we've had parents who we think are too involved. But sometimes they just enjoy it. And I've had to say to some parents, you know, it's time for your child to have a lesson alone, and it's nothing against you at all. You've been fantastic. But no matter how great your relationship is, the young teenager is going to act differently in the lesson without the parent there. They're going to feel more open to answer questions. They're going to feel way more open to ask questions and to engage in a different way. And I just encourage them that this is part of this process. And as the young teens are trying to figure out how to organize their lives, most of them are not very organized, you know, trying to get them to have calendars or use the calendars on their phone. And I experiment with different ways of doing charts. Teenagers basically don't look at charts, but sometimes I get them to do logs instead. Let's say you practice your scales for this long and your new piece for this long, and just write in how much time you actually really did spend. Talk about it and see if that seemed right to you, so that they're not really being exactly told what to do, but they're learning, you know, yes, that seemed about right. I think I need more time for my scales, which is always great to hear, or something like that. So you're helping them learn how to self-assess in their practice process and to be realistic about their readiness to perform. It's a long process.
I think it also gives the students a lot more freedom to be expressive in a different way in their playing when their parents aren't there. When they they can feel safer just with having just their teacher.
Right. I will say that the communication with the parents still has to be there. So I'll do a lot of email behind the scenes with teen parents. And I tell them, I want to know if you see something odd going on, either lack of motivation or being upset with the repertoire I just gave them or this or that, encourage them to talk directly to me. Encourage it. And sometimes we can kind of work together behind the scenes to smooth out, any issues.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with one of my students last week that not doing what he was supposed to be doing, and I said, you got to do what you're supposed to do. I don't want to have to talk. I don't want to have to talk to your mom. It's when they've been given the responsibility of come to the lesson by themselves, taking the notes, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then they're not doing it. Then you have to turn around and it's like ratting them out to their parents or something. But so he was like, okay, I'll do it. So we'll see what happens this week. The other thing that I like to do, what I like to do with my students, you were talking about when you let the students write the notes in their music, I think that's really important, and I actually start that process really young, even when they're little. I'll say, can you go get your favorite marker, and can you write this word, practice 5 times or something, and I'll tell them how to spell it and all that, and they just kind of take ownership of it. It's in their handwriting, they'll see it. They see my handwriting most of the time. They can't read it anyway, and then they don't even, or if they can read it, they don't even really see it. So I think that getting them to write in their music at a young age is actually a good thing too.
Yeah, I actually started something a couple of years ago that's been successful, and I actually did it for my organizational issues, not for the child. Is I have a sheet that I fill out. So as students get more advanced, become more advanced. They have so many things to do. So there's scales, there may be 3 or 4 etude books, there may be a current piece, a new piece, a reviewing piece, there may be orchestra and chamber music. So in order for me to keep track of what I listen to, because I realized sometimes I would skip something for a couple of weeks and I didn't want to do that, I write their assignment on a piece of paper, and beside it there's a row of blocks, and I write the date in the lesson that I last heard the piece. So that way I can make sure I'm holding them accountable, because I will go look at that sheet and say, well, I haven't listened to the scale in 2 weeks. We need to do this today. And it's funny because they'll come in and, oh, I didn't practice that. I said, well, this is not a mystery. Like, look at this book. Which thing do you think I'm going to ask for? Which are you guaranteed that I'm going to hear in this lesson today, because we didn't do it in the last couple of weeks. So that's been helpful for me as a structure to keep them accountable too.
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis, do you have this available that we could see?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me post that for you.
Yeah, it's a great.
Thank you.
It's a great chart. I wanted to say another thing about the idea of the students writing in their music. I have found it really fascinating. Let's say you're talking about hanging the arm weight or something like that, and you're asking them to remember to do a lower arm level of a certain bar, or whatever it is. If I say to them, write something in your music that's going to help you remember what we did, and then they look at you blankly, and then you say, well, what out of all the different words we just used, or concepts we just used, which one's going to help you remember it? And it's really interesting for me to hear what they say back.
Yeah, that's true. I do that too.
It might be low elbow, or it might be just something. It might be not a word that I didn't even use.
Like marshmallow.
Marshmallow.
Yeah.
There might be a conceptual way of envisioning it that wasn't even what I said verbally, and it gives me a really good clue into how they process information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's a very specific, E string level, like clear like that, or if it's more sensory, or something like that. It's really interesting to see how they're processing what you just did. So I think asking questions to them a lot about what are you going to write there to help you remember this. You will learn a lot about them, and it will help the whole process of working with them.
Well, she come up with great new imagery that you hadn't thought of before.
That's true. Okay, next question.
I have a question about the other end of that spectrum of home practice, which I have. I started 9 beginners at the beginning of this year, so I'm seeing this a lot, which is that they will listen to me in lessons, but they don't like listening to their parents at home when they're trying to guide them. So what I started doing was having actually a few minutes in the lesson for the parents to work with the student while I watched, just so, because my first teacher never did that, and I did the same thing. I would yell at my dad all the time when I was little. So what I've also told the parents is, like, I still managed to turn out okay, like it's normal, but so what other suggestions do you have for making sure that it's not a surprise that the parents are going to be helping at home, and making sure that the young students are willing to listen?
Right. Well, I definitely have the parents work with them in the lesson so I can observe that. So sometimes you want to be careful about how much physical work they're going to do. Sometimes the physical things they do are not helpful. So, for instance, if you're working with a young child on the arm level, and then you ask the parent, let me see you do that, and then they're like holding the arm like this, they don't really know. So that might not be the best thing. So one of the things I have found really helpful when I sense those tensions is that we make a deal in the lesson. We make a plan that mom or dad or whoever is going to help you with this, this, and this. These 2 things you're going to do on your own. These 2 things you're going to do with them in the room. These 2 things you're going to do with them not in the room. So that there's balance in their practice with mom helping and mom or dad helping and not helping. And then sometimes I've had to say to parents, you can only say nice things. You can only say positive things. Because I know they're yelling at them. I mean, some of them are just yelling at these kids. And sometimes they need language. So you have to model the language. Is that too hard? Let's do this 5 times and just count to 5. Check your magic X. Is it good? Okay, let's do it 5 times. I think you have to model really, really good language for them.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. One is young children especially respond to a known quantity. So one of the things I do is I put the parent in charge of quality control, and I try to make sure I write out the quantitative part. So, for example, if they're learning, martelé bow on the A string, I'll be very clear in front of the student, you need to do this X number of times every day, and mom or dad are in charge of the quality. So if you don't hear this or it doesn't sound this way, then it doesn't count towards that number that you have to complete. The other thing is I'll make sure in front of the parent and the student, the first time the parent comes in, I see that look of exasperation. They're not listening to me, they're not doing. I have a conversation with the student, with the parent there saying, I can't be at your house every day to practice with you. So I need for your parent to be able to help you with your lesson at home. So you need to let them. So I just kind of help negotiate the ground rules a little bit between the parent and the student, and then I try to make sure that things are more quantified, and like Rebecca said, roles are more clear in that act of practicing, and what exactly is the parent in charge of, and what is it that the student needs to be responsible for. And again, with young children, 25 times or something, they in fact, sometimes you can ask them, how many times do you think you need to do this until you can do it really, really, really well? And, you know, they'll say 3. And they say, well, no, almost. Like, you up the number. But sometimes they'll say 50, and I have to downgrade the number. But, again, it's then asking the parent in the lesson to play the game of, okay, let's decide if that was a good one or that one needs to be done again. So the kid sees me working with the parent in terms of understanding the quality.
Good.
And you know, there are times when the parent in the room is destructive for the student. You know, there are some parents who just can't sit quietly and observe their child, and so there are times when I've had to ask parents to leave younger than I normally would, or we just realize that a child is going to have to go independent earlier than you might think. And every family is very, very, very different. So,
Even if it's not at the point where they're ready to have independent lessons, I remember having one of the fathers who basically kind of pulled his chair right up next to me. I was like, whoa, I can't deal. I said, you have to sit over here and you know, give us some space. And then every time she would make a mistake or something, he would jump up out of his chair, and you know. And I had to talk to him separately from the lesson, but I said, you can't do that because she has to be allowed to make mistakes without, you know, having this reaction from you, because you're going to ingrain something that's not good. And I said, you know, you just have to sit back and just be a silent observer. And he was great. He took it really well, and he was a silent observer, and then she got to a certain age, and he just stopped coming. I didn't even have to ask, so it worked out well. But I think talking to the parents, especially if they're trying to engage in the lesson and talk during the lesson and have these reactions, you have to address that right away.
Well, I think the other thing you can do, too, and it goes back to this creating intergenerational activities within a studio, depending on the size of the community you're in. I know for myself as a parent, again, coming back to this issue of being a musician who's trying to help your own kids practice, I was very, very fortunate that I had advanced teenagers around of my own students. So my children actually practiced violin with my teenage students. And it was well worth, you know, I paid them like, you know, $5 a half hour or something, which for teenage students was great. I mean, that's, you know, beyond minimum wage. So I oftentimes will try to see if I can pair up some of these younger children with an older teen mentor, which is good for both parties. It's good for the older teenager. They feel empowered. They feel like, oh, wow, I have arrived. I do know something. And the younger child much more looks up to that older teenage student, especially young boys. If you can get them connected to an older boy, it's really helpful. So that, again, just maybe sometimes gives a parent a break. Because there's also parents that have, you know, I have a student now, the kid's about 7, and there's like 2 or 3 kids under that age. I mean, I can only imagine how difficult it is to find the time for that parent to sit uninterrupted with an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old and be able to devote the time. So sometimes you can negotiate helpers to come in and intervene.
Yeah, I definitely do that. Well, my college students all work within the program for their grade. They all have like this quarter they're all working with beginners, next quarter intermediate, the third quarter advanced. But I also have some of them actually go to the homes of the students, the parents with extra lessons, and I have had some of the teenage kids in the program. It's a little bit harder, especially if we're all spread out, you know, be able to get to the person's house might be harder. It sounds, is that how you worked with yours? This teenagers went to the student's home?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. I mean, I'm in a smaller geographical area, so I can work some of that stuff out. Sometimes the places I teach have other rooms, so parents can just come by with their child, and the other teenager can be at the school and be working with them. And it's nice because I get to talk a little bit about teaching and pedagogy with the teenage students as part of the process of working with the younger child too, which kind of, they get very interested in that as they get older.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, good. Next question.
I have a question regarding musicalities. Can you talk about some idea on sharing when you're teaching phrasing for intermediate or more advanced music? And maybe some demonstration would be really helpful for the viewers.
I'm not sure I understood you.
Let me say again.
Say it again.
Yeah. Just regarding like, can you sorry, let me go back to the question. Can you give some ideas on like teaching music phrasing for more like intermediate or advanced music, and some demonstration for the viewer, if it's okay.
Okay, sure. Hang on, let me get my fiddle here. I think for every level in the advanced, of course, when we say musicality, you know, playing musically, that can mean a lot of different things. So a lot of people connect that with playing expressively, which means that you feel an emotional, internal connection to what you're doing and expressing that. You can be expressive and not be doing musically correct things that the composer wrote. Like you can be expressive and play all the wrong rhythms, you know. You know, so I sometimes separate being expressive and being musical in certain ways. The first thing, honestly, is breathing. I think the first thing is breathing. You know, when you see kids play at any level without breathing before they go, then it's not organic into their whole body. So when you're going to, so let's say somebody's learning meditation from Thais, if they start like this, without breathing, there's a disconnect from their singing voice. So the first thing to develop musicianship in that regard is breathing. And when we breathe, I have them prepare as if more like a cellist. You can see it more easily that when you breathe, it's like air is going into your whole body, and both arms will prepare on some level. So if you breathe but don't move your arms, you're not really going to play a beautiful sound. It's not going to prepare the motion. So the breathing, I think, is really important. In terms of understanding phrase, you can do it on many levels. You can do it intellectually. You could talk about the notes are going higher, and so we get louder, and then they come back down, and seeing the arch of the phrase, seeing the structure of the notes, seeing the patterns of the music. And for some kids, they get that right away. For some, it's a little bit more of a flow, you know, just a bigger, broader sensation of tension and release. So the language of that can be could be anything, and different students will understand it in different ways. If you talk about broad sweeping flow to one student, they'll just like, what are you talking about? And if you talk about, you know, the note and this note is higher and this is the appoggiatura and then it comes lower, that's just like too much information for them. They're just, it's not attaching. So I think you have to approach it in all the different ways and see which one is working for a given student at that time. And eventually they need to understand it in all holistic levels. I know that's kind of broad.
Yeah, I mean, I think you also have to bring it in from the very beginning. Just even when you're finishing up Go Talent Roti, the last couple notes, if you just do a retard, it introduces that this is a flexible, fluid piece of music we're approaching. It can be subtleties with dynamics that you introduce. But again, I use my older students to lead a lot of the pieces in concerts, and so we talk a lot about this idea of breathing when you're leading in the group class, and the younger kids pick up on that just by being there and by osmosis. So yeah, absolutely, breathing and movement and being free, having all the parts in your body functional and free, I think enables some of what's inside of you to come out. If your bowhole is tight or you're gripping too hard between your shoulder and your head, no matter what's inside you, it sometimes just can't get out.
Right. Another thing, some other things are in typical musical examples would be, well, retards is one, fermatas, transitions from one kind of section to another. I use a lot of language that has to do with things in life. You know, just coming to a stop sign, what do? You slow down. And then what do? You look both ways before you go on. It's the same thing in music. You slow down at the end of something, you're at a transition, you look at the conductor, you look up, you decide what you're doing next. You make a decision about what color what room you're going into. Door number 1, color number 2, color number 3. You know, lots of things like that to attach to their imagination about time and space. And like the top of a crescendo, it just takes that much longer when you're climbing up a mountain to take that last step because you're so tired. You know, there's something about that penultimate note that has to be longer musically because in nature that's the way it is. So I do a lot of connections to nature in talking.
I also
and
try
physics too. Depends on the kid. Physics, math, also.
Yeah, whatever you
Depends
get.
on whatever you can get.
I mean, I also start talking a lot about harmony and try to point out to them, you know, what's happening here. Oh, it's a key change, or we're going from major to minor, or, you know, as they get older and they're, you know, we do a lot of Baroque stuff in orchestra and in group, you know, suspensions. That's a really easy one to point out, and it's so emotionally engaging, and they just need to have their awareness brought to what's going on harmonically, which is really easy to ignore sometimes when you're a single-line player like we are, and those things are very powerful, I think, especially for teenagers when they really start to hear harmonies.
Yes, and deceptive cadences. I do a lot at the piano at that point. I bring them over to the score and show them, you know, 1-4-5-1 and how you can't relax yet because the climax of the phrase isn't until over here. So I think in the end, the more understanding they have of the music itself and how that plays into the decision making, you can start that very early, very early.
Next question.
I'm curious about classicalmusiccity.com. Could you guys talk about that?
Oh, I started that many years ago when I was teaching at a public school program in a charter school, and a parent came up and was just talking about this new thing called social media and all the things that were happening online. And part of it is I wanted a place for my students to go where I knew they would find, first of all, it would be a safe place to go. So there's nothing on Classical Music City that you wouldn't want a 5-year-old to bump into. So it's a collection of really the best videos. Plus, I've done a lot of filming of master classes, so you can go on there and see things that aren't available anywhere else. For strings, it would be people like Suvin Kim, Nick Kendall, Mimi Zweig is on there, Victor Danchenko. There's a lot of master classes. It also lists, you know, any job that's open right now, all the auditions, news of what's happening. It's kind of a go-to place for what's going on in the classical music industry. And I try to keep it bright and fun. There's a big map. You can go and click on the buildings, and each building represents a different aspect of our industry. So if you click on the Opera House, you're obviously going to go into lots of information about opera. If you click on the, I think there's a medical center, so if you're interested in things that have to do with tendinitis or the body, you can go into the medical center and get that information. Or there's a Science and Technology Center, so you can find out about robots that play violin, all kinds of stuff. So there's probably, the whole site at this point is probably like 100,000 pages right now. So basically go in there and do a keyword search on whatever you're interested in, and I think you'll be able to pull something up.
Do you find all of this information through your own research? Do people send you information? How do you find all the information for the site?
Yeah, people can, currently they can post events they want to put up there for free. So everything goes through administrative approval. So even though people want to post stuff, someone has to look at it first. So either myself or my staff looks at it to make sure it's okay, and then we'll post it up. So yes, the community can contribute to that. There is also a social network within there that you can click on and become a member and have more conversations within the site.
Question, so let's say that we wanted to go look at, we all did a pedagogy weekend last spring at Peabody, and if we want to go and see all the concerts there, how would we research that?
Okay, you probably just click in, I think I used the keyword VPW 2014. So if you click that, you can, and say exact term, exact phrase, because you can search by separate words or the phrase. A lot of that stuff should come up. If you go into the movie theater, anything that's video, if you click on the movie theater, you'll then see all the different categories. And one of the categories is master classes. And then you can dig down and you can go into strings, and you can go into violin. I have it listed by the teachers. So anything that's video associated, start with the movie theater, and you can go from there.
Good. Okay, next question.
With violinpractice.com, would you find it beneficial to teachers of other instruments, other stringed instruments possibly, or is it strictly violin?
Well, right now it's just violin, and as we work through it, the window is open to do this for viola and cello.
Yeah, actually, I talked to a cellist last week at an orchestra I was playing in who has been doing this course. Yeah. And found it. She was telling me how much she enjoyed it and how she's asking questions like, "Oh, do you guys always keep your hands on the kids so much?" And she was very fascinated by it as a cellist.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
So I think social media is becoming more and more of a presence in the performance, especially. You know, anyone can go on YouTube and start uploading performances. But what advice do you have for teachers to establish a social media presence? How to make the best use of this new tool?
Well, I definitely have a page for my school because it's just nice. I can post some video there. I can put out announcements on Facebook. So I have a Facebook page. The problem with social media right now in terms of a teacher's relationship to their students is the students don't want to be where the teachers are. So as my own children have informed me, I'm really old because I use Facebook. So I have, my kids are 20, 18, and 16. So they are kind of leaving Facebook. Instagram, I guess, is the new big thing, Snapchat. So you're kind of chasing after them in terms of the student-teacher relationship. But I do let my students friend me on Facebook because I don't put anything out on Facebook that I would mind them seeing. I kind of use my Facebook as more of a professional entity than anything else. It has been helpful with some of my teenage students who do post on Facebook because I can kind of see what's going on with them. And a lot of them, have a lot of issues going on in life, and so I can, have a little conversation about that when they walk into their lesson so they can get it out before we start the lesson and we can have a more productive lesson. But I think you can't ignore it anymore. I mean, the whole entire world is just shifting to being online, and it's exciting, it's overwhelming, and you're just going to have to incorporate it into our profession.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I go back and forth about some aspects of it, but one of the kind of funny things is that I have a group that I conduct as a pre-conservatory violin choir, and they have a Facebook page that I'm not allowed in. And it's actually really great because they do things like, come on guys, learn your music for this Saturday, or what colored ties are the guys going to wear. I mean, they will communicate and monitor themselves and motivate each other, with me not being involved in it. And so it's actually, that's actually been a good thing. I think keeping connected to your teachers, to your alumni, and to your families, and having a place to do that is really great. I think the lines of communication are really complicated now. So in my life, there are people that I work with at the conservatory who are in an older generation. They don't even do email. They never even got on the email train. There are people that I have to call or write because they don't even do email. And then you've got a lot of people living on email, and then you've got the kids who don't want to do email. And then you tell them, well, wait till you get to college because your professors are not going to text you. And then, of course, what am I doing? I'm texting my students. If it's a college professor, It's like, how is it the entire universe has my cell phone now? But I have high school students that will text me at 1 in the morning, and I'm trying to say to them, this is not okay. You can text me, but not 1 in the morning. So I think you have to sort of figure out your paths of communication with all the different generations that you're working with right now, and I think it's going to probably settle somewhere, but I'm not quite sure where. But you have to be open to any of them, or you're going to lose people in your lose people.
I mean, I think also if those people out there that are public school teachers, you have got to have a social media presence for your school because, as you know, the budget axe falls constantly, or the threat of it. If you have social media lined up and you have a Facebook page or you have Twitter accounts, you can get to all those people who come to your defense and protect that program really fast. So I would say it's critical for public school teachers to have social media presence.
I found we have a Northwestern Strings page that's just private, that's just for the group kids and their parents too. It's actually and we keep the past kids are still on there too, so they can stay in touch with what the new kids are doing. But I've also found that we have a number of students who are not on Facebook and who never have been, and they don't do Twitter, they don't do any of that. They choose not to. And I've said, well, are you sure you don't want to do it just to be on this Northwestern Strings page? And they don't.
And there are some parents who don't want their kids to do
Right.
it.
That's right.
So in other words, in my group where the kids are on this inside site, it's partly why I'm not involved in it, is that I don't feel that I can make a requirement for our students to join this. It can't be the way that I communicate with them.
Uh-huh.
Communicate amongst themselves and they can choose to be on it or not, but I can't force parents to do that. So I send emails and I post things on Google Docs that I share if they want information that way or some other way like that. So you do have to be sensitive to this. There may be parents who either don't want their kids on it or who are, their kids in trouble, so they're off Facebook for 6 months. You know? So,
yeah, no, I do. That's true. I send a note through that, but I also send emails. I have to hit everything, make sure everybody gets everything. So, no. Okay, good. Any more questions? Okay, I have. You know what, Rebecca? I'm wondering if you would give us a demonstration of something that is on your violinpractice.com. I want to go up to the next level of like how you teach shifting. So what would be in some of these videos that are preparing kids to practice for shifting?
Well, I like to start at the beginning, so you'll see all kinds of the early things. So you can see my violin here. All kinds of early things, sliding and tapping. I like ice cream. I like ice cream. Left arm level tappings, things like that. Silent shifts, up, around, extend, back, around, down. I'm doing a lot of tapping and sliding at the same time these days so that you're working on two motions at once, this motion and the vertical motion, and with the thumb tapping as well to release. So these are all kind of pre-shifting things. I'm also very into exploring these days the relationship of the arm weight to shifting. So I'm doing some bouncing and sliding where you feel some relationship that's vertical. So it's possible, I think, to shift like this and still be very tight up in the arms and in the thumbs. So hang, release, hang, release, hang, release, hang, release, and monitoring this motion. Swoops this way and this way, with and without the bow. When they actually get to putting the fingers on, I do a lot of finding positions without shifting one-to-one. For instance, perfect fourths, so that they're doing the shift during an open string and finding intervals that are comfortable, open, perfect fourths and fifths. And then eventually we'll get to this kind of work, and very, very, very slow. And matching harmonics, there's a million things. But I like to take things in very small increments because I think when we're teaching, you never know which small little piece might be helpful to a given student. So in general, I'm trying to put really, really lots of small things all the way through and then integrating into pieces.
Right, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, I think that we are out of time. We're actually already over time.
Okay.
If there's anything else, is there anything else that you all would like to add, Rebecca and Phyllis, before we close?
Well, thank you for doing your course. I think it's really good.
Yeah, it's been. I've heard a lot of positive. Speaking of social media, I've heard a lot of nice comments about the course.
Good, thank you. It's been fun. It's been enlightening, and I mean, it's been a huge learning experience for all of us. And it's really enlightened. It's opened up my eyes to what social media does. We have people from I think 141 countries from all over the world, and it's amazing to me how small the world is, and how important this is. And I think that your site, theviolinpractice.com, is going to help people as well when they get there. And so I'm really happy that you got to come and share and talk about it with us. Is there anything else?
I think that's
I
it.
think that's good.
Just
Thank
come
you.
visit violinpractice.com and
Check it out.
yeah, see what's in there.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, team, and thanks everybody. I think this is our last week, so we'll be making announcements on the board and everything like that. So we'll see you in class this week, and have a great day, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
That's right.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.